My name's Lila Rothschild. I'm the program director at EBF. I'm just going to say a little bit about Ernest Becker and the EBF before getting started. And so to start, Ernest Becker, he was a cultural anthropologist. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1974, which was actually after his death, for the book, The Denial of Death. And his thesis is that our culture shields us from death anxiety by enabling us to feel that we're part of something important and valuable that will live on after we're gone. And so this isn't to imply that this is the only function of culture, just that it's a very important one. So from Becker's work, terror management theory was developed in the mid-'80s by three social psychologists, Jeff Greenberg, Tom Pazinski, and Sheldon Solomon. And TMT was developed to test Becker's thesis, which they've now successfully demonstrated in over 1,000 studies and counting. So to learn more about TMT, you can check out our website where we have more resources and information. And then for the EBF, we were founded in 1993 to continue the work and application of Ernest Becker, and that is to examine the ways in which the human awareness of our own mortality affects our beliefs and behaviors on both an individual and societal level. So over the years, EBF has sponsored events, supported research, hosted speakers, and developed content related to Becker's synthesis and also related science. Our quarterly newsletters examine various social issues in light of our relationship to mortality. And we're also a hub for interested people who come across this work and want to learn and talk more with others who have similar interests. We're currently in the middle of a project trying to connect activists whose work may bring up death anxiety with researchers who may be able to help design studies or offer research-based insights to improve advocacy efforts of those groups. So please reach out if you'd like to be involved or learn more about that. And finally, if you find these webinars valuable, please support the EBF by signing up for our newsletters, telling your friends about us, and making a generous donation at our website. We really appreciate it, which you can do in the link below in the description to this video or on our website. So the topic of today's webinar is the Beckerian concept of heroism and how we can apply this to our lives today. We have Dan Liechty joining us, a professor of social work at Illinois State University, and our moderator, Patty Kwok, who has a doctorate in depth psychology, and she's a registered nurse and nurse practitioner in the Seattle area, and she uses Becker's work in her work on cancer survivorship. So some quick notes: to post a question during the Q&A, you can use the live chat to the right of the YouTube video player and just type a question in there. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And the webinar is also being recorded, and we'll post it to our YouTube channel today as well. Okay, so I will now pass it to Patty. Hopefully all the technical difficulties have resolved, and she can introduce herself a little bit more and tell us about her Becker journey.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Patty Kwok, as you've heard. I think I did turn off everything, so this should be fine.
Sounds good, Patty.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I've been an oncology nurse practitioner since about 1983, and I began to notice very early on in my career this, what I would call sort of a distorted sense of heroism that since medicine has become more and more of a business, sort of undermined a nurse's way of showing up with patients and families and also in community and having a voice. And I felt that some of my work and conversations with patients and their families was almost undermined. And it led to a sense of feeling helpless and burned out, and felt like we were on such a pivotal edge dealing with patients and families. These conversations were amazing with people suffering and becoming vulnerable, that I wanted to show up in a more helpful, healing way. And by about 2008, I was ready to step outside of nursing and medicine and study humanities in the form of depth psychology. A really good friend handed me Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death. And then I saw eventually the film Flight from Death, The Quest for Immortality, which really began to shape my graduate studies in depth psychology and eventually my dissertation, where the overarching question was, who is the hero who saves lives in a culture that denies death? And I had met Dan Liechty about the time I was finishing my coursework and asked him to be my external reader, and which was an amazing experience. And he very quickly could see my sense of wanting to examine this sense of heroism. And I this morning turned to opening the dedication in Becker's book, Denial of Death, and I read this amazing quote, or his dedication to his parents. To the memory of my beloved parents who unwittingly gave me, among many things, the most paradoxical gift of all, a confusion about heroism. So I really felt the need to explore that. That really resonated with me, especially studying depth psychology and discovering Becker's opening chapter was the depth psychology of heroism. So Becker's far-reaching insights really asked me, I wanted to begin to ask myself, show up with my patients, with families, colleagues, and especially in the community in a more healing way. Becker made me want to be a better person. And I just am excited to be here and to have these conversations, to be in a community and to safe with these discussions and death anxiety and things we're not allowed to talk about, at least in 21st century medicine. So for today's format, we'll have brief comments from Dan, 5 minutes, and then open to Q&A. So Dan, thanks for being here with your expertise, and he's going to talk much beyond medicine. Dan, will you please just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and maybe for your opening comments, your ideas of Becker's sense of heroism and how that might be helpful to us today? Thanks, Dan.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I know we're all just about zoomed out, and we'll be happy when this whole thing is over with, and we can delete our Zoom completely from our programs. I'm now 67 years old, and all my teaching this year is online. I never thought I would do, I never thought I'd be in that situation, and but we're making it through, and it's the best. We're making the best of the situation as it is. I do want to apologize. I came to my office to do this because I have much better bandwidth here than at home, and I have a big picture window right here, and so I am an average white man, but I'm not as white as I look here. So anyway, let's see. I first got acquainted with Becker's work back actually when I was in seminary. My first inclination, or my first professional path, I guess you could say, was to study religion and become a religion professor. And as part of that, I went to seminary after college, and there was a course on, let's see, apocalyptic literature in the intertestamental period or something like that. And so just one of the readings in that course was about 5 pages or 6 pages of Ernest Becker. And I read this and I thought, what is this? And if I don't remember a lot from seminary anymore, but I know that I just became, from that minute on, I got the book, got the whole book that was from, read that, which was The Denial of Death, and then Escape from Evil. And I started trying to get everything I could get a hold of. I was a denizen of used bookstores back in those days. And so, within a year or two, I had amassed most of Becker's books and read them through and all that kind of stuff. And man, I thought this stuff was really, really important and really fascinating. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't find anybody who was interested in this stuff. Nobody. I mean, I would have thought that he would have been, on everyone's course lists, if nothing else. And so I just, continued to read this stuff and continued to imbibe it and so forth. And I went on and did my doctoral work in religious studies. And then, as it turned out, I kind of had a left turn, and I didn't go into, I didn't just become a religion professor. I actually went into mental health work. And so again, I was thinking, well, this is really important kind of stuff. And this would have been during the late 80s, I guess it was. I started really, really trying to search for other people that were reading Ernest Becker. And that was back in the days before the internet. So all we had were these big books in print and literature review in print, these big things. You'd have to go to the library and pick out a topic and then go through and see what's there. And the only people that I could find at that point in time who were doing anything with Becker were in the journals that were directed towards life insurance salesmen. People that were doing life insurance sales, they recognize, hey, if you want to really sell someone life insurance, play on their sense of heroism, play on their sense of wanting to protect their family, and they were citing Becker as their basis for that suggestion. And I thought, well, so I went back. I was going back to do a second doctoral degree in counseling, and because, like I said, I kind of moved into mental health by that time, and I just thought, well, I'll do this book. This will get Becker out of my system. I'll do this dissertation, I should say, and it became a book. That'll get Becker out of my system, and then I'll go on and start focusing on something that's going to actually be, helpful to my career. And so this book came out, and soon after this book came out, I got this phone call from this, out of the blue, from Seattle. I didn't know anyone in Seattle. Well, this was Neil Elgie, who had, he kind of had a what would you say, a standing search out for anything Becker, and he found out about this book, and he called me up and said, and all of a sudden, that through Neil and the Ernest Becker Foundation, that then put me into contact with people in across the disciplines who actually were reading Becker and applying Becker to their discipline, and just created a whole a community of people doing this. And so I've been happy to be in that ever since. In social work, one thing I did was, when I got into mental health work, I thought, well, I need to get a degree that legitimates me in this field. So I went back and did a master's degree in social work, and then that second doctorate in counseling. But I actually went into hospice work after I graduated from social work school. I actually went into hospice work and spent a number of years as a hospice social worker. And then from there, about, I guess it would have been 22 years ago, it's my 22nd year here at Illinois State University. I was kind of tapped on the shoulder to come out here and try to get a master's degree up and running, a master's program, building on top of a very large bachelor's program, which I did. And I thought, well, I'll probably be there about maybe 4 or 5 years. And now here it is 22 years later, and I'm still here, and really appreciate it. And I'm sure be here till I retire, which is coming up really soon. I'm saying all that to say this, that my real background approach to Becker was in what Becker had to say about religion and theology, our understanding of who God is, and what we mean by the spiritual nature of the person, and that sort of thing. And that really does dovetail, though, very closely with this topic of heroism, because the thing I noticed in Becker's work, which starts from the very beginning and goes all the way through, is this concept that he called expanded transference. That essentially we maintain our sense of forward movement in life. I guess you could say self-esteem, or the sense that life has meaning, the sense that, just the forward movement in life. Moving forward as opposed to getting bogged down, and in the widest sense, emotionally, psychologically, all down, maintaining that sense of forward movement. He says that the way we do it, and again, this goes clear back to his earliest book, 1960, where he was writing on Zen Buddhism. And he says the way that we do it is that we project images of perfection. We sort of in ourselves feel ourselves as inadequate in some way, imperfect, inadequate. Different philosophies use different words for this. In my tradition, it was feeling guilty or sinful or whatever. But we feel this inadequacy, and that would cause us to bog down. But so the way that we deal with that is that we project images of perfection and power and completion and glory and so forth onto external objects, which can be people, which can be places, which can be things. And then we turn around and draw our power for living on those projected images of perfection or fullness or power or whatever it be that we have projected onto external objects. And he talks about this all the way through his writings. Each one, he talks about it in a different way. But that concept of expanded transference is kind of the basic thread that runs through his writings. And by the time he got to the later writings, the last 3 books or so, now he's talking about that in terms of heroism. That these projected objects, especially when they're people or ideas like, a god or something like that, this is where the term heroism comes in. And I think it's a good term. I do think, that is kind of what our heroes are when we think about it. Our heroes are those people that we sort of look to and wish we could be like. And in a sense, we draw power for them by vicarious identification, and this extends to certainly to all of our great religious leaders and so forth, for the people who believe. If you're outside of the belief system, then it might even seem a little bizarre.
So,
but again, I want to, yes.
Can I just to summarize then that your overview or your understanding of this concept of heroism, how I understood it from you, and it really opened up looking at the way we were practicing in medicine, was the idea of this transference and transference. So it seems to be some of what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. And see, the thing is, it's a process. If you know how social learning theory works, it says that we learn by copying the model, or by looking at a model and doing what the model does. But we also then become models for people looking to us. And I think that in terms of, specifically in terms of medicine, I think that one of the things that medical people are constantly dealing with is the idea that their whole work is with people in very vulnerable positions who are, in a sense, sort of casting about to try to find some projected hero that they can take some sense of comfort and from and so forth. I may be scared, but someone knows what they're doing, and well, then the medical person wants to be an adequate transference object for those patients and their families and so forth. But in the end, they're only human beings, and I think that's the core, I guess you could say, contradiction or anxiety producing thing that medical people work with. At least this is what I saw when I was in hospice work, that they really want to be adequate transference objects to people. They want to let people, take comfort from them and so forth. But in the end, they are still only human beings. And so, like across the board, they're subject to, all of our transference objects are subject to deflation and so forth. But I do think that in religion in particular, we are dealing with the dynamics of what Becker called this expanded transference, and we're encouraged to accept these images of perfection and power and so forth, and then draw on them for our own living.
Yeah, and this is very. That leads to the next because some questions came in before, so sorry to interrupt, but there was a question about, why is it harder in today's society to feel like a hero as an average person? And what can we do to show up as a hero in our everyday lives, especially in light of social justice movements happening today? And I hope that isn't getting off the subject too much, but.
Well, I think there's a couple things. I just want to say that it's really understandable why the psychology of why we are engaged in this constant process of seeking power outside of ourselves. When you think about it, and this is kind of what attachment theory underlines, when you think about it, the original experience of every human being that ever lived is being absolutely dependent on a higher power just for their own continued existence. And so, you know, in a sense, that's the experience of throwing yourself on the care of someone more powerful, someone greater, some more, you know, for your very existence. That's kind of the earliest experience that all of us have of life. And we carry that with us. We carry that within us throughout our life. The interesting thing about Becker's idea of heroism, though, in my view, is that not that he played up the idea that of, you know, the hero as the conqueror of death. And I mean, that's kind of the ultimate thing. We look to heroes, we choose our heroes on the basis of, you know, this kind of feeling that they've faced death and have found victory, and by vicarious identification with them, we may be in some way able to do the same. Becker emphasized what he called everyday heroism. The heroism of just getting up in the morning, going to work at a job you hate because it's not what you'd necessarily want to do. Let's put it that way. But you get up and you slog through the day and so forth because you've got responsibilities for your family. You've got responsibilities for children. You've got other, in a sense, you kind of give of your life so that others can live. And Becker was really, I really like the way that he underlined that kind of everyday heroism, as opposed to this sort of larger than life heroism. And the two are connected, obviously, but that's one thing about Becker's understanding of heroism I really like. All heroes, because we're human, are subject to deflation. That is to say, our clay feet are there to be exposed if someone exposes them. And I think one of the reasons that it's so hard to maintain yourself as a hero for others, or to maintain faith in your own heroes, is because we are so overly exposed today in with the media and the internet, and everyone knows everything. You know, we know whether Bill Clinton wore boxers or briefs. I can't remember which one it was, but that was a question that was asked to him on national television. And in a way, knowing too much about your heroes is dangerous, because it shows that they're just human beings like the rest of us. Which we all know that, but we kind of try to keep that also kind of out of our line of vision, if you want to say it that way.
And do you think it's harder now than in previous generations to just this idea of hero?
Yeah, just because the exposure is so great.
Facebook envy.
Yeah, in a way, the exposure is so total that it's really hard to kind of maintain this sense that someone is larger than life, you know. So yeah, that's a big part of it. Now, one thing I emphasize with my students is that it really isn't these people that we admire greatly, especially, I'll just use religious figures here, Jesus, Gandhi, Buddha, and so forth. You know, these people are sort of the moral heroes. They're the what Kohlberg would have called, the sixth level of moral life and so forth. But these aren't the people that keep society moving. These aren't the people that have their kids and raise their kids and put up with the snotty noses and the changing the diapers and go to the PTA meetings and sit through those fifth grade band concerts where the squeaks from the clarinets just about drive you nuts, but you do it with a smile on your face because you're encouraging them. Gandhi didn't have to do that. Jesus,
yeah, but yet we have all those expectations. So how can we keep showing up as hero in light of all that?
How can we? I'm sorry. How can we?
How can we show up as an everyday hero in light of all those incredibly daunting expectations and the hero hierarchy is what I call it?
Well, I mean, I think if you've kind of imbibed Becker's ideas, you kind of have to recognize in a way that that a hero, some category of people that are separate from the rest of us are, and worthy of this kind of superhuman or super facade, that's really kind of a myth. And part of I think as you take Becker's ideas into your life, and you in a way your heroes kind of dissolve away. Now we still have this need for heroism. We still have this need to, but I think we can handle this as human beings best by allowing each other to be human, not expecting these superhuman, not expecting people to act like they're more than human in order to maintain your faith in them. I mean, we're seeing this right now with people we have this one larger than life superhero who's now, we're starting to see the clay feet there. And it's really causing a lot of stress among many people because, they had put so much hope into that this was going to be where the big change was. And this was going to be, and now it's not happening. And I think what we want to move towards is a society in which we have little deflations instead of these great big ones. You see?
Yeah. Okay. Well, here comes a lot of questions, Dan. Sorry. And we're more than halfway into this, but this is from Ken Vale. Can you discuss heroism and atheism in terms of how atheists are viewed by the religious versus their own experience of going without religious ideas that might otherwise help manage death awareness? Do you want me to read it again?
No, I understand what he's saying. Well, for one thing, Becker would say that the same dynamics that work on religious people also work on atheists. And in a sense, theism, belief in God, is a construction of God, and atheism is also a construction of God. When people tell me they're atheist, my first question is, well, tell me about this God you don't believe in. And you'll find that there's as much variation of the God that people don't believe in as there is among believers of the gods that they do believe in. So I'm not sure that particular distinction between atheism and theism is, it's an important distinction on one level, but I don't think it is so much at the deepest level. People who don't, people whose understanding of God is that God doesn't exist, still have to find other things that they project power and perfection and so forth onto in order to continue their existence. Oftentimes, and we've seen this, in history, oftentimes that's a political party or a political ideology that functions as sort of their highest good, if you want to say it that way. In America, unfortunately, so many people are left with nothing but material objects. Yeah. And so now it's having this car, the best car that, and that's what gives them the sense of power and forward movement. But again, all these things are subject to deflation, and recognizing that things are that our heroisms are subject to deflation, I think should stand as a ongoing process for those of us who are trying to understand and apply these ideas to our lives, that we are constantly on the lookout for places where we are, you might say, projecting too much, and then doing self-criticism to bring our projections back down into the real world.
Thanks, Dan. Here's another great question. Short of enabling conscious encounters with mortality, do you see any new large-scale replacements for religions that might enjoy popular assent and buffer us from destructive behaviors that result from death anxiety? Mm-hmm. And then here's a follow-up question to that, because the second question Let's see. Oh, go ahead and just answer the first one.
Well,
sorry.
See, the problem with these heroisms, and here we're talking about large, not just individual people, but large ideas and institutions and so forth, is that I put all of my eggs in this basket, and then I have to defend it. And we live in a world in which, because of all this, rapid communication and so forth, all of our, no matter what basket you have your eggs in, it's subject to deflation. And so we turn in anger and in even violence against those that would have us, that would undermine our projections, I suppose you'd say, the validity or the plausibility of our projections. And in defense of our projections, we're going to fight them. Well, Becker thought that most, well, all really projections of God are, they're human projections that then need to be defended. And that's the basis of, that's why we have wars. That's why we have, oppression and other kinds of things, and other negatives in our history. And so he was asking himself this question: is there any kind of way out of this thing? Or are we just always going to be just, we project new things and we hang on to it and fight and defend it until it's deflated, then we jump onto some other bandwagon and then we defend that? And is history, is there any end to this in human history? And he thought, he was speculating, but he thought the only kind of end that he could think of would be a transference object which doesn't want to be defended and doesn't need to be defended. And in fact, that if you as soon as you jump in and try to use whatever power you have or whatever to defend it, you're actually undermining its validity right then and there. And he came up with this concept of the transcendent God, the wholly other transcendent God, which you got from reading Paul Tillich and Martin Buber and some other people. He thought if we could understand God, the object of our adoration or whatever, this is totally outside of religion per se, but if we could understand God, or if we could build our human spirituality on the image of a totally transcendent God who is not made greater because you defend him, who doesn't need your defense, and in fact doesn't want your defense. When you jump in to defend, especially with violence or other things, this image of the transcendent God, you've actually lessened that God. You've actually deflated that God, not inflated it. And so his, I guess you could say, his speculation was that perhaps that would be something that, that could bring us together.
Here's sort of a related follow-up question to that from Michael Coffey.
Yeah.
20th century Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner said something close to Rahner. Tomorrow's Christians will be mystics if they are anything.
Well, Rahner was one who was thinking a lot in the same direction, I think, as Becker. Becker wasn't reading Rahner that I know, but he was reading Tillich, and Rahner certainly has read Tillich and so forth. But so this idea is that if we could have a projected concept of God, which is totally transcendent and totally other, and doesn't need or want or is not enhanced by our defense of him, then maybe that's a spirituality that people could come together on rather than fight each other about. But he said there's some problems with that. One is that that part and parcel of that very image of God would be the recognition that it's a human projection.
Yeah.
We would have to embrace the idea that this is definitely another transference object. It is a human projection. And then he said, can anybody other than is this viable then for anybody other than the you might say the small group of highly intellectualized, the Rahners and the Tillichs and so forth, and does it have lasting value? Could we really expect that people can recognize that our image of God is is a human construction, and at the same time maintain our faith in it over a long period of time. And he somewhat doubted whether that could happen except for just the very small group of people. He didn't say it couldn't, but that was where he saw the big question of human history about.
Well, Dan, do you see any similarities between Ernest Becker, Otto Rank, or Joseph Campbell when it comes to their respective viewpoints on the hero image or the symbolic self? And then there's a similar question from Bernie Meyer. Can you point out the Rank-Becker interrelationships in this regard?
Well, Becker learned a lot from Rank. Becker had this concept of the expanded transference all the way through, all the way through his writings, as I say. But the thing that vexed Becker was he didn't understand. He was trying to deal with, well, once you show this to people that this is what's going on, in other words, insight, why doesn't everything get better? Instead, what we see is we have even movements. And for example, in his time in psychology, we have movements that have shown this mechanism to us. It's not a secret. And yet what they turn around and do is become they turn around and then create their own heroes, their own, that they have to elevate and then fight with the other between schools of thought. He used Gestalt as a good example of this. That Gestalt certainly exposed this mechanism to us, this mechanism of projection and then drawing power from the projection. But then all they did was turn around and make the founders of Gestalt into the hero and that kind of thing. And so we just have another turning of the cycle, if you want to say it that way. We can all easily see the folly of other people's projections. And
yeah, Dan, I also wanted to ask, there just seems to be many people enamored with Joseph Campbell's whole idea of the hero's journey. And you've talked a little bit about that, but that wasn't really related so much to Becker's idea.
Yeah, well, I think it definitely relates to Becker drawing on this category of hero, because I think Becker was trying very hard to be in conversation with what was going on at the time. And what was going on at the time was all this, being enamored with Campbell and the concept of the hero. There were other books coming out with the hero in history and all this kind of stuff. And Becker was trying to be in dialogue with that. But again, I think that what Becker really was emphasizing was not these inflated heroes, but the heroism of everyday life. That's what his interaction with this stuff really comes down to. The heroism of just the everyday man who gets up in the morning, slogs his way through the day. And I say man because that's what he is, but we could say it's not gender specific. Who gets up in the morning, slogs their way through the day because, taking all the pain and suffering that comes with that, because they have responsibilities. They need to keep their children fed. They need to raise their children. They need to, these kind of things. And so I think in a lot of ways, Becker's use of heroism really comes down to a criticism of this idea that we focus our concept of heroism on these kind of larger than life figures. He understands why that happens, but
yeah, here's another question about transference from Audrey. If a transference God doesn't want or need defense, then how does it serve as a denial of death?
Well, because we still draw on that transference God as that's where we draw power for living. And in fact, once we recognize that this God, that this image of God that we have actually is diminished by our violent actions to defend, then we ask ourselves, well, where is God in the world? And the only place we find God in the world is in other people. We experience God through loving connection to other people. And so the immediate ethics of this transference God are rightly understood. But again, that's the problem. It's really hard to keep the right understanding going in over a long period of time. But the the place where the immediate ethics that this kind of a image of God demands of us is that we open our arms up to other people as fellow human beings and embrace each other as fellow human beings and see each other as enhancing our sense of well-being and our sense of forward movement in life rather than as potential threats to it.
Do you think the pandemic has influenced the way we view that, or more openness to being in community?
In many places it has. In other places it simply raises the kind of death anxiety that we keep under a lot of times. It kind of punctures through that. And let's put it this way, it creates the possibility. When our death anxiety is exposed to us consciously rather than keeping it unconscious, then we have the possibility of recognizing the fallacies of all of our small projections, I guess you could say. And that gives us the possibility of opening ourselves up to each other and so forth. But it doesn't always work that way. The way it can sometimes work is that people work all the harder to try to stuff it under.
Here's an excellent question from Peter Capel. Do you think there's a connection between heroism or lack of it and compliance with laws or medical recommendations like vaccinations?
Well, obviously, yeah. I mean, anybody who understands how pandemics work, are planning to get vaccinated at some point. But there are those who have made a kind of a mini heroism, I guess you could say, heroism on a pretty rather absurd level, but still there. And in those communities, it's very strong, of the idea that, I'm not going to, no virus that is going to keep me from having my freedom and having my, this, that, keep me from travel, keep me from, and so there are communities in which spurning the knowledge that we have and the activities such as vaccinations that would go with that knowledge, spurning all that is a way of trying to puff themselves up and make themselves feel like they're kind of beyond mortality. Yeah. Does that make sense, Patty? I mean, you're the medical person. You tell me about this.
That's a great question. I haven't thought a lot of it. Well, I just see very much, if it works for me, I want it. I'm first in line. I hope I'm considered high risk because I'm going to get that vaccine, or I can't go home from Hawaii. I mean, I heard comments like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So that's against being in community or finding a real community. It goes against this idea of just wanting to show up in a safer way and discuss what is really the fear underneath that on a deeper level.
Yeah. I mean, for me, part of recognizing my humanness, the fact that I stand no taller than any other human being, leads me to want to stand in that line to get vaccinated. You know what I mean?
Yes. Here's from Monty James. Thinking about Otto Rank's work, how does creative type relate to your everyday heroism concept as you will proceed to define it?
Well, let me come back to what I was saying about Rank earlier, and maybe that'll, basically, Becker was struggling with this idea of why is insight inadequate? Why is insight into these processes not adequate enough for us to actually make changes in our behavior? In fact, all we do is just repeat the cycle, except with new projected heroisms. And right as he was really struggling with that concept, what is it about insight that's not enough? He runs across Rank, and Rank's whole idea is about fear of life, fear of death, and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden it opened up. This is really where the death anxiety thesis sort of gelled for him. And all of a sudden it opened up to him why insight is inadequate. Because now he could see what the stakes are in this thing. The stakes aren't just whether I understand the concept or not. And if I don't, well, then I just need to study it some more. he realized that what's at stake here is life and death issues. I mean, if I allow my projections to be deflated, I die. You know, that was something that he learned from wrong. And actually that was the major step in having this whole thread of expanded transference gel into, in the end there, into the death anxiety understanding. Death anxiety, go ahead.
Just from my there's been, you know, this really difficult way to understand Becker. If you're trying to introduce Becker's ideas to patients, it's not filling out, it doesn't help filling out advanced, not end of life care. So it sort of leaves you in this place like what you were saying about Becker's ideas and theories. And yet I do try to create that bridge between science and philosophy on a daily basis. But so how do we become more practical, real in Becker's applications in medicine, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I don't know about medicine because I'm not really, you know, but I know in my hospice work, I use Becker's ideas all the time in the back of my head. I didn't walk into a family and try to, you know, say, now here's the denial of death. We're all going to read this and discuss it. Not at all. But for example, I would oftentimes walk into a situation in which a very beloved and respected parent, either a father or mother, that in a sense was the backbone of the whole family, kept that family system together, is now dying, and the family's in chaos. And Becker's ideas helped me to very quickly, and they're arguing with each other, and that's when all these questions, all these old things of who did dad or mom love best, and all that kind of stuff comes up, and you know, and using Becker's ideas, I could quickly assess that in this family system, in a sense, the projection, the hero the projection of the hero, the parent that you know is being undermined, is falling apart. Therefore, the family's starting to fall apart. And so then I can sit down with the family and I can say to them, well, you know, dad or mom or whoever it is, you know, they've really had, you know, they've really held this family together. Now they're in the situation where they're dying, and they need help and they need care. And are we going to just fight with each other? Are we going to organize ourselves so that we can, and within a very short time, literally half an hour to 45 minutes, people that were practically throwing things at each other and I never want to speak to you again, they're falling into each other's arms. They're talking, okay, now Tuesday night, you're going to come over and you know, and Wednesday night you'll be here, and you know, all this kind of stuff. They start working together now as a family to take care of this dying parent. And
because you honored their sense of heroism is what it sounds like.
Yeah, honor. I mean, Becker's work helped me, first of all, analyze what was going on, to see what the dynamic was here. And then secondly, kind of in a gentle way, help them see what kind of changes are happening in their family system, and giving them a more, I don't know if rational is the right word, but a more thoughtful, relaxed way of asking themselves, so given that these are the changes, how are we going to act in this new situation? And you find out that they don't want to be at odds with each other. Quite the opposite. And oftentimes I would use the idea that the place where your dad or mom is going to remain long after they're dead is exactly in the hearts of each one of you. So you become, you say you want to defend the honor of dad, or what, you can only do that by the dad that's in each other's hearts, and they start to recognize that's the place where they can. Does that make? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, meaningful to me as a nurse. Yeah. Thank you, Dan, for your insights. Here's a great final ending question. We have a few minutes left, but how would you advise people to construct new hero images for those who want to?
To do what now? Say it again.
how would you advise people to construct new hero images for those who want to?
Well, if you're talking about how do I be an adequate hero for someone else, like how do I be an adequate transference object for someone else?
No, the answer to that is no. I guess how do you begin to see a hero in a new light without so many projections? I don't know. Expectation.
Well, I think, yeah, I think the best thing we can do is honor the heroism of every day. When we, like, for example, sometimes this happened not that long ago. I was in a grocery store and this one child was it was a young mother, and this child was just screaming and yelling. And obviously she was very embarrassed. I just went up to her and I just said, I just want you to know how much I admire your patience as a parent. You see, letting her recognize, or letting her see that she's thinking everyone thinks I'm an awful parent because I can't this kid's yelling, screaming. I can't. No, kids do that. Honor her being a good parent by the fact that she's not hitting the kid and pulling his ear and whatever. Rather, she's just kind of patiently trying to let the tantrum blow over. You see, and honor her heroism in that. Honor her
instead of pathologize it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you, Dan, so much for your insight.
Yes. I'm popping back in. That was a good ending question and really appreciated all your insights, Dan. The hour did go by really quickly. I feel like these topics could continue to be discussed.
Yeah, I'm just revved up now.
Well, if you'd like to make your contact info available to people, Dan, if there are some people who might want to reach out to you in the future.
School of Social Work, Illinois State University.
All right, awesome. Yeah, look up Dan Liechty, and we'll provide his info in the description. And if you enjoyed this webinar, again, please support us by telling your friends and making a donation, which you can do. There'll be a link below this video in the description or on our website. And we really appreciate the support to be able to continue to do things like this. And if you're interested in keeping up to date with future webinars or just general news at the foundation, you can sign up for monthly emails to get those updates, and that can be done on our homepage. There's a sign up form right in the middle. And so other than that, thank you everyone again. We will have a recording of this available today on our YouTube channel as well, and hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving.
Stay safe.
Bye. Thank you. I'm just getting ready.